The chair of the full committee, the gentleman from Kentucky, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the recognition. I appreciate it. This morning I was talking to a group and somebody introduced me about the Energy and Commerce Committee and quoted Mr. Dingell, Chairman Dingell, someone that I had the joy to serve a couple of years with. And he says, if it moves, it's energy. If it's still, it's commerce. So that's our jurisdiction. And I can't improve on Chairman Dingell, except I would like to say that it takes energy to move commerce. And that's going to be the theme of our committee over this next couple of years, is that how do we do it in a responsible way? I went to school on the Hudson River. Other than the Commonwealth of Kentucky showed me a more beautiful spot than around West Point, Bear Mountain, that area. And you couldn't get in the water because of industrial pollution. So the progress has to be responsible. And so how are we responsible? And so Mr. McGowan, you said that throughout human history, the world has never used less energy. And throughout human history, energy's gotten cheaper. There was a study a few years ago that measured the standard of living by the cost of light. How much it cost light in the 1800s versus what it is now. Essentially, it's not free, but people feel like it's essentially free. My great-grandmother used to spend an hour before everybody else got up just to get the stove hot. That was the quality of, so the standard of living of energy is important. And so if we look at Europe, and we had Eric Schmidt from Google, not the Senator Eric Schmidt, talked about a book he wrote with Henry Kissinger called Genesis, and had a lecture or a meeting at the Library of Congress, and he said that Europe's chosen not to grow, is what he said. So if you look at just the example of Europe, so from you say energy transition, if you replace fossil fuels, I'm for all the above, but if your goal is to replace fossil fuels with wind and solar, what are the national security implications of that in Europe today?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. Well, I mean, I think we've seen devastating effects in Europe, the deindustrialization of Germany in particular, and frankly, the retirement of nuclear plants and the removal of cheap Russian fossil fuels has been devastating. I'd like to point out, too, that their carbon emissions, if you're keeping score, have gone up, not down, despite all these investments. It is not the way to do things. It's critical that we do all of the above, and that includes renewable power. Just like a carpenter has more than one tool in their tool belt. You can't use a hammer on everything. I've tried, it doesn't work, but you have to have other tools in your tool belt. So this energy mix is going to change over time, but we have to lead with what is reliable, efficient, and affordable, because otherwise we could bankrupt ourselves and be in a position like Europe where they have none of the above.
Thanks. I want to make sure. So, Ms. Eversole, would you comment on how the lessons learned we can have for how quickly Europe's tried to transition to renewables and the negative impact in terms of economic growth?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your question. Look, 85% of the gas that came from Russia was replaced by gas from the United States of America. That's good for American workers. It is good for America's national security. It's also good for Europe. I think what Europe learned was that they were over-levered. A diversified portfolio is really important. API supports an all-of-the-above strategy, but I think we get caught up into arguments that are more about picking winners and losers in various forms of energy, and it simply doesn't have to be that way. This is about energy addition. Our demand, not just here in the United States, but around the world, is growing, and I would rather, that energy has to come from somewhere, and I would rather it come from the United States of America, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. And so, but also during that time, we were replacing a lot of the LNG gas. We also had the export ban that came. So, I mean, that was, I know there are European leaders that said could be devastating to them if we did that.
Yes, we very much appreciate the executive order on the first day of this administration repealing the so-called LNG ban because that doesn't make any sense. I think that there are questions around can the United States continue to meet the demand in the world, and the answer is yes. We can do it because we can be more efficient. We can do it when we have capital.
I want to get one more question. So, Mr. Arnold, we talk about AI and growth in the economy and cheaper energy and everything, but there's people creating the infrastructure for the energy. Would you just talk about the benefits in energy communities or your community for energy jobs? It's not just people working in an AI data center, it's people building the infrastructure to get the energy to the data center. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. So we need energy to power the rest of the manufacturing facilities. I've worked in biopharmaceutical manufacturing breweries, which I think obviously is pretty important to some Americans too. But it all starts with that energy, and then it continues to provide work opportunities for those professionals. Our job's to build stuff, build it well, and then we look for the next project to build for folks.
Thank you. My time has expired, and I will yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time